Okay, hello everyone, I'm back with another video. And today, guy, and we've been talking about it over and over. Another best video for all my friend, for all my fan, everybody, all to support me. Good evening, good morning. It doesn't matter where you at. Good morning, bonjour, bonsoir, magandang gabi, buenos dias, good morning, good afternoon, bonsoir, ou bien bonjour. Judia, today we want to talk about what's going on in the world. Nous sommes capables de dire, Judia, nous voulons parler de ce qui est passé dans le monde. Guy, we've been saying that over and over. We've been talking about, first we start with Ukraine and Russia. And now we're going to Gaza and Israel. And then everybody can hear that the former president, excuse me, the president of the United States, which is Joe Biden, say to Israel, don't attack Hezbollah. But it's something to me, it's not the way the Prime Minister of Israel want to go. It looks like he want to go a different way. So you don't want the war to be spread. And then we've been talking about, everybody been talking about World War III, World War III, World War III. And you guys hear what happened in Yemen, and what happened to American base in Yemen, and what's going on. So, guys, so tonight I'm trying to bring you another one of the best video tonight. So let's listen. What is this guy again? Is that John Kirby or something? He's a spokesman for the White House or something. I don't know. Let's listen. What is it?
Has Ukraine received its last check from the American taxpayers? Well, according to John Kirby, a national security spokesperson, the aid to Ukraine is not indefinite. Let's check out what he said the other day.
On the Ukraine funding, we're coming near to the end of the rope. I mean, today we announced $200 million, and we'll keep that aid going as long as we can, but it's not going to be indefinite. So are we moving with a sense of alacrity? Absolutely. I couldn't give you a date certain on the calendar.
Not indefinite is a real change of tone from the language that's been used up until this point about funding for Ukraine.
I wonder if that New York Times columnist, Tom Friedman, who we played a clip from him the other day, who said even to have any willingness to shut off Ukraine funding is like evil. He used very stark language, is morally evil. Is he going to use that kind of language for John Kirby? Conceding something that you and I and so many skeptics have been saying forever, which is that eventually we will stop sending money. That is the reality. We're not going to fund this forever, even though the Biden administration has said that they would do that it would come to an end. So doesn't it behoove us to push for and work for a diplomatic outcome at the point where the Ukrainian resistance is still funded, rather than wait until for that to peter out, as it eventually will do, and then they'll be in probably a worse bargaining position with Russia. Yeah, so many of us have been saying that, but cooler heads would not prevail.
It really highlights how deeply negligent the U.S. and Western allies that thwarted early peace attempts were, knowing that they were only going to be able to keep the float of Ukraine's war machine afloat for a limited period of time. I do think that the funding demands of the crisis in Israel-Palestine is squeezing the U.S. military a little bit. There was a statement made, maybe it was by Antony Blinken, that it can do both. But I think the way that you're seeing people change their rhetoric and the way that you've seen the emphasis shift from Ukraine to Israel over the course of the past week is telling a very different story. And I think it probably is also not irrelevant to the Biden administration that it's looking at really terrible poll numbers in states like Pennsylvania and Michigan that it needed to win in 2020, losing by almost double digits. No, not margin of error numbers, but 7, 8, 9%.
Really, yeah, terrible is understating it, frankly. These are the worst numbers he's ever had versus Trump in these states. It was not like this for the last election. I'd be real worried.
And looking at the public opinion around the war in Ukraine and seeing that it is not an issue that helps Joe Biden, I do wonder if that's finally having an impact.
Speaking of issues that won't help any anybody. Lindsey Graham, the most hawkish voice within the Republican Party, he had this to say in response to the ongoing crisis in Israel vis-a-vis Hamas, that we should actually bomb Iran. Let's play it.
What I would do is I would bomb Iran's oil infrastructure. The money financing terrorism comes from Iran. It's time for this terrorist state to pay a price for financing and supporting all this chaos. Yes, if you're the Iranians, if it were up to me, this war escalates, I'm coming after you.
So if it weren't already enough that Israel is in the process with American state money backing it.
Is pushing back from within the GOP. Senator Rand Paul, he said this, encouraging restraint on the subject. Let's play it.
You do. You know, I have nothing but sympathy for the Israeli people at this point in time. I think that the primary objective at this time has to be to get the people that attacked them. They were in Gaza. Before we think about spreading this to the rest of the world, maybe we ought to think about exactly what's going on the ground there. I do think that there is immediate reaction sometimes to let's get everybody who's responsible. And without question, Iran had their hands in this. But you remember after 9/11, there were people who wanted to attack Iraq. They said Iraq caused 9/11. Turned out Iraq didn't have anything to do with 9/11. So let's see where the facts lie. Let's investigate this and let Israel need to do what they need to do, which is to have a punishing response to the people in Gaza, to say no more, we're not going to let this happen again. When you follow the money, if the money...
So also, I'm not sure if it was that clip or it might have been a different clip with Rand Paul, he also pointed out, responding to calls to bomb Iran's nuclear capabilities, that Rand Paul was just being very frank with the viewers, the American people, like the cat's out of the bag. You can't totally just reset their nuclear capabilities. Part of it is knowledge that they've already accrued. The materials can be hidden and are very small. Just blowing up the facilities is not going to even accomplish necessarily.
Is provided points to the likelihood that the rumor is false, right? If he could have called up Israel and said, hey, can you just show me the picture real quick and make it so that I wasn't a liar, I think that would have happened. So the retraction, I think, does really speak volumes. And people in that reflecting on that moment that just happened last night are being reminded of the testimony of babies, incubator babies being thrown out of window
when I look at it that way, so I hope they not try to make it like make that war split all over the world. And then I think the best thing they should do, they should try to come up with a solution, find a way to stop the war. We don't need war all over the world. So if it's happening what now, Hamas and Israel, and it's going to be Iran, Hezbollah, Syria, and everything everywhere. So the situation get tough now. It's like everybody, scared to go out, scared to go to shop, scared to go somewhere, and then people doesn't need that. People need their freedom. They need to go out, shopping, have fun, vacation. That's what they need. And we don't need war in a war. Let's listen, guy.
Just like Jamie Lee Curtis did with the pictures of the babies in cages that turned out to be Palestinian babies in cages, not Israeli babies in cages. He tweeted a picture saying, I stand with Israel, of devastated terrain, which unsurprisingly was a picture of Gaza devastated. When this was pointed out to him, he removed the image and replaced it with an image that had no background, just a color with the words praying for Israel still on top of it. No follow-up saying that he was also showing any sympathy for the people who were actually pictured in the devastation that initially incited his sympathies.
Do you remember when Justin Bieber visited the Anne Frank house?
The reason we must, quote, finish Iran, a nation of nearly 90 million people. What are we watching here? This is not sober leadership. She's a child, and this is the tantrum of a child. Ignorant, cocksure, bloodthirsty. Yet no one in Washington scolded her for it.
He also tore into Graham and Crenshaw, who went a step further, urging Israel to bomb Iran. Take a look.
What exactly would happen to the United States if we declared war on Iran and started blowing up their infrastructure? Lindsey Graham has no clue what would happen. He hasn't thought it through. He's almost 70 years old and he has no children. He doesn't care. But neither, amazingly, do most of his colleagues in Washington. They're as reckless as he is. Texas Congressman Dan Crenshaw took to social media to call for what he described as a war to end all wars, as if there is such a thing.
Yeah, I mean, this is a great example of why I thought Tucker Carlson's influence on the discourse on the right was very often good, a positive thing, despite him getting thrown off Fox News for whatever reason. He is someone who was a thought leader on the very different non-interventionist ascendancy on the right.
The day began with one of his former lawyers and co-defendants pleading guilty in the Georgia RICO case. You may recognize her, sitting right there. And it ended with ABC News reporting that his former chief of staff, Mark Meadows, there on the left, has been talking with special counsel Jack Smith and his team in exchange for immunity. According to ABC News, citing sources familiar with the matter, Mark Meadows has spoken with special counsel Jack Smith's team at least 3 times this year, including once before a federal grand jury, which came only after Smith granted Meadows immunity to testify under oath. Now, NBC News has not independently verified the reporting, and Meadows' lawyer told NBC News in part, quote, "I told ABC their story was largely inaccurate." He didn't specify what was inaccurate, so we're just trying to sort that out. Now, the Meadows news broke just hours after another one of Trump's former attorneys, Jenna Ellis, pleaded guilty in Trump's RICO case. In the weeks after the 2020 election, you may remember.
Oh my God! I mean, what is going on with former President Donald Trump? I think he should say enough is enough. If I was President Trump, I would not run for a re-election. I would sit and relax, and I would not go. But maybe you know why he does it. Maybe he going to win a second term. Who knows? And we don't know. But it's too much drama. It's every day. It's something different going on for the former President Trump. Let's listen, guy. It's sad.
Election, I believed that challenging the results on behalf of President Trump should be pursued in a just and legal way. If I knew then what I know now, I would have declined to represent Donald Trump in these post-election challenges. I look back on this whole experience with deep remorse.
Timmy Dial-Ganga-Williams, a former federal prosecutor who served as the senior investigative counsel of the January 6th committee, and he joins me now. I just got to start by noting, you got a day where you've got the third Trump lawyer pleading guilty on the same day that one of his ex-lawyers, Michael Cohen, sitting testifying against him in a civil fraud case after having pleaded guilty as well. Like, the unbelievable, and I would dare say unprecedented run of lawyers for this guy ending up with criminal pleas. I think this is a record-setting run that Donald Trump's lawyers are on.
Probably so, but if there's one thing lawyers are, is risk averse.
Right, that's why it's so rare. That's my point.
Yeah, but I think the lawyers are also going to be well equipped to see the danger they're facing with criminal exposure.
In terms of pleas,
in terms of pleas, I mean, I think lawyers are going to be likely the first ones if you have them among a set of defendants who can see down the road, they can see mandatory minimums, and they are going to be the ones who are likely to want to be out there first and get the best deal possible, which I think is what's happening here.
Okay, let's talk about Jenna Ellis, right? So one of the things noted...
Guy, let's stop it right there. And I believe the former President Donald Trump, I believe Mr. Donald Trump, I don't think he would go nowhere. And I think it's like they play politics with the guy. They play politics. And then I don't think he gonna go anywhere or he gonna win anything, and they just let him stay. I mean, so let's watch and see what's gonna happen on the last minute for the former President Donald Trump, if he's gonna really run for a re-election, guy. Let's see what happens. He did start running, but let's see if he's going anywhere with that. Thank you so much. Let's watch that. Let's pay attention. This is Giuliani, the former mayor of New York City, and then the former prosecutor for Donald Trump also, and then I think he's in trouble also. So let's listen.
Would testify to that. So I would find it very, very hard to believe that she did that, but she could have gotten intimidated.
That's them waiting for the espressos and sambucas, apparently. I don't know what that setting is. But he doesn't want her to flip. And it seems to me like when you're talking to Trump lawyers, Jenna Ellis flipping now really squarely puts Rudy Giuliani in a vice.
Certainly does. But remember, we're also talking about a RICO case. So anytime you're getting evidence against one defendant, that's going to go against all of them. So yes, you are building a case against Rudy, but that case against Rudy will also be a case against Trump. So it's not just bad for one person, it's bad for everyone that's left over.
It's interesting you say that, because I remember when the case was brought, it was the last of these criminal cases to be brought. There was we spent a lot of time on Georgia's RICO.
I believe it's enough for this part, so let's move on to something different, guys. There's a lot of things going on in the world, so let's see what's going on. Let's go to the next page. Guy, I'm trying to bring you the best I could, but please support, like, subscribe, thumbs up, like, subscribe. If you're not subscribed to me yet, share me out, guys. Thank you so much, guys.
We're saying the exact.
Donald Trump. Sources telling ABC News that the former chief of staff, Mark Meadows, has been granted immunity in that case in exchange for testifying before the grand jury. So bringing us this story is ABC News chief Washington correspondent and co-anchor of This Week, Jonathan Karl. Thank you so much for being with us, John. So first of all, what more are you learning from your sources at this hour?
This is a major development, Kana. The world had been watching this case for what Mark Meadows would do. Mark Meadows was Donald Trump's chief of staff. He was at his side throughout that entire post-election period where Trump was trying to overturn the presidential election, one of his most loyal and important aides. And what we're learning is that he has told federal prosecutors that the election was not stolen in his view. In fact, he said to those prosecutors, we are told, according to our sources, that he agreed with the assessment that the 2020 election was the most secure election in American history.
Oh, my God.
He told prosecutors, according to our sources, that he repeatedly told Donald Trump that the claims of widespread election fraud they were hearing that were coming in were not turning out to be true. So this is clearly a very significant case, both in terms of the federal investigation into President Trump's efforts to overturn the election, but also, frankly, in the political background as well, because if Donald Trump now has his former chief of staff saying that everything that he was saying about the election being stolen, that he didn't agree with, that wasn't true. I mean, this is a major break with the former president by one of his most trusted and loyal lieutenants.
Right, at tremendous odds here. So, John, of course, at the heart of this, as you really talked about there, was the former president's baseless allegations that the 2020 election was stolen. And Meadows, according to your sources, has made this striking break from his boss's claims. The big picture, though, as you talked about, how does this play into the former president's legal challenges, of which there are many, which we will talk about?
He's facing, obviously, multiple legal challenges. He's got the case about classified documents. He has the Georgia election interference case. He has this case. He also has the case up in New York, multiple cases in New York, one against his company, one against him.
Guy, I don't say it. I bring it to you. This is news. And that just happened maybe a couple of days ago. So it's something to me now. It's like no way out for the former president. No way out. And this is his former staff, the chief, the head of his staff, and then say that about him. I think it's crazy. How much can he take? How much can he hold on with? I mean, I think it's really it's really sad. But you know what? I guess it is what it is. Let's listen more before we move on.
Asked Raffensperger to go out and get him 11,780 votes, exactly the number of votes he needed to win Georgia. Well, that call was set up by Mark Meadows. The first voice you hear on that call is Mark Meadows identifying himself and bringing in the President of the United States. So Meadows has tremendous visibility on what was going on with Donald Trump during that entire period. And I've outlined for you through our excellent reporting by our team, including Catherine Falders, our reporter, detailing what he said about the election, what Meadows told Trump, or at least what Meadows has told investigators that he told Trump about the election. But this raises more questions. I mean, what else will Meadows testify to? He has, as we understand it, according to our sources, an immunity agreement to an immunity order, which allows him to have immunity for what he told the grand jury. But Mark Meadows had closer visibility to what Donald Trump was doing in the final months of his presidency,
Wow.
I would say, than just about any other single
guy. I mean, I don't say it. We hear it. And we've been saying that over and over every day. Why would he stop? And then it's like day by day, it's more coming in and more coming in against the former president. And it's like a war. He's doing a war with United States law. I mean, it is, I believe he's not going nowhere. I believe so. I don't know. I don't say it's true, but I believe he's not going nowhere. That's what they try to do. And they try to see and wait, and then maybe they're going to stop him at the end. They're going to stop at the end. Hey, you can't run. You got this, you got to go this, you got to go there. You can't run for re-election. I believe that's what they're going to say to him at the end. Maybe at the very end, they might be let him know that. And then try to replace him with somebody. I mean, they think might be Joe Biden, but I'm not sure. I think that's what it's going to be. It's politics, guy. It's not a joke. I mean, it's a serious thing coming up right now against the former president, Donald Trump. It's very serious, guy. It's not a joke.
Heard Trump say that.
Yeah, Meadows specifically asked about what he heard from Trump on this. Said that he never once heard Trump even privately acknowledge that he had lost the election.
Right, and that could be key here, right, John, as we move forward, because they would have to prove, right, that he knew that he had lost, believed that he had lost, and tried to overturn it.
Right. It's a complicated case. Right. I wouldn't say that is a definitive thing that in terms of all the allegations of election interference, but it is a key thing that the special counsel is trying to establish, is that Donald Trump knew that he lost and knowingly tried to overturn an election that he knew he had lost. And the way they've tried to establish this, and the January 6th committee did this as well, is showing all of the people in and around Donald Trump who told him point blank that the allegations of fraud were not turning out to be true. So now you have another person, perhaps the most important person yet, saying to prosecutors, yes, he told Donald Trump that the allegations coming in were not proving to be we're proving to be baseless. So it's another piece
it's
of the puzzle.
It's very sad,
Meadows,
guys. Very sad for President Donald Trump. It's very sad. It's just coming out. It's not like
John
something
Carl,
been
of
passed.
course, our thanks to you
just
for your
couple days
reporting.
ago.
We appreciate your
It's
time.
happened.
For more on this, I want to bring in former Republican Congressman from New York, John Katko, former Republican Congressman from Virginia, Barbara Comstock, along with ABC Senior Executive Editorial Producer John Santucci. Thank you all for being with us. John Katko, let's start with you first. So what is your take on this, of course, this new ABC News reporting here that Meadows said the former president was, quote, dishonest on election night?
Well, I think that this whole development of Mark Meadows being immunized and testifying before the grand jury is a devastating thing for the legal team for many reasons. But if you couple that with his 3 inner circle attorneys who have already pled guilty in the racketeering case in Georgia, I can tell you that that's a very complicated mix for Trump to overcome. And I was trying racketeering cases and political corruption cases. You're ready to try the case with nobody cooperating. They now have at least 4 heavy-hitting insiders with Trump that are going to testify against him and talk about this election fraud. I don't see how he overcomes it, especially in the Georgia case, because I'm quite certain that Meadows will be used as a witness in that case as well. So it's a very, very uphill battle, and this is something Republicans better start paying attention to, because Trump's going to be sitting in the courtroom next year with his inner circle all sitting there pointing fingers at him saying he did it.
Interesting, certainly. And Barbara, what are your thoughts on all of this?
Well, certainly you also have his White House counsel who've already testified that they told him he had lost. Of course, you have Attorney General Barr, who also testified that they told him he lost. What's also troubling is, here Mark Meadows is, he was the Freedom Caucus, and just last week, the past few weeks, he's been up in front of Congress encouraging Jim Jordan to run for Speaker. And Jim Jordan, of course, is still propounding this big lie. And so Mark Meadows public.
So you see what happened, guy. When I say it's new, it's something very new. It's happened last week, because after the Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, lost his job, so it's been something 2 weeks ago, right? 2 weeks ago. This is brand new guy. I think he's really in trouble, and it's in trouble already, but it's more coming.
That he is fundraising based on what he knows are lies. But I think the whole Freedom Caucus that continues to, have death threats against members of Congress who won't support Trump based on, saying that he won the, he didn't win, that he won the election, and not, daring to say that, that Joe Biden won the election, and if you don't, if you dare to say that, you're going to get death threats. I think, every member of the Freedom Caucus should be held to account, or those 147 members who, wouldn't certify the election. They have a lot to answer for when Mark Meadows, of all people, is now saying that he knew that was a lie.
Wow.
And you mentioned the book there, Barbara, and sources telling ABC News that when speaking with Jack Smith's investigators, Meadows conceded that he didn't actually believe some of the statements that were in that book, statements like the election was stolen and rigged.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't make much money on that book, but any money he made, he should have to forfeit.
All right. And John Santucci, to you, you've covered the former president and the administration very closely here. What do we know about how he is reacting to this news? Also, we have Michael Cohen's separate testimony today as well in this civil trial in New York. They were in the courtroom together. So first, any reaction from the Trump team?
Yeah, a quiet day for sure, Kana, across the Trump beat. So on reaction from Team Trump, we actually just got a statement, my colleague Catherine Falders, that broke this story, just learning from the Trump campaign. A typical reaction that we've seen with most of this reporting brought by ABC News. And the Trump team telling Catherine that yet again, in their opinion, without evidence, that these are all lies and leaks. They go on at one point, Kana, to say this is all murky gossip, not knocking the reporting, not saying it's wrong, but saying there's other things to it, and go on to blame Joe Biden for this investigation, again, without evidence. But as you just noted, the reporting here
is being brought forth by Special Counsel Jack Smith. Now, we have some word in regard to the various times Mark Meadows spoke to Special Counsel Jack Smith and provided him cooperating information about Donald Trump and his role in attempting to overturn the election. Now, I want to be clear that we don't know the entirety of what Mark Meadows has told Jack Smith, but here's what we know as reported by ABC News. Mark Meadows has spoken with Special Counsel Jack Smith's team at least 3 times this year, including once before a federal grand jury, which came only
on several social media platforms. In the speech, which was monitored by the New African Channel, Barack Obama advised Israelis to look at the world through the eyes of Palestinians and to recognize that neither occupation nor expulsion is the answer. He emphasized that just as Israelis built a state in their homeland, Palestinians have a right to be a free people in their own land. Furthermore, Obama encouraged both Israelis and Palestinians to work on the peace process to enhance security and improve the economies of both parties. Here are excerpts of the speech.
It is not fair that a Palestinian child cannot grow up in a state of their own.
The region, U.S. officials tonight say a Navy warship in the Red Sea intercepted and shot down several missiles and drones that were launched from Yemen. CBS's David Martin reports from the Pentagon that the intended target was believed to be Israel.
The USS Carney fired the American military's first shot in what threatens to become a wider Middle East war, shooting down drones and cruise missiles fired in the direction of Israel by Iranian-backed rebels in Yemen.
USS Carney, operating in the northern Red Sea earlier today, shot down 3 land attack cruise missiles and several drones that were launched by Houthi forces in Yemen.
The Carney, which had been with the aircraft carrier Gerald R. Ford off the coast of Israel, got there just in time, passing through the Suez Canal on Wednesday and arriving in the northern Red Sea, where it had a clear shot as the drones and missiles flew north.
We cannot say for certain what these missiles and drones were targeting, but they were launched from Yemen, heading north along the Red Sea, potentially towards targets in Israel.
In the last 2 days, there has also been a series of drone attacks on American troops in Iraq and Syria, attacks which are usually the work of Iranian-backed militias. One of them turned out to be a false alarm, but resulted in the death of an American contractor who suffered a cardiac arrest. In past attacks, when an American has been killed, the U.S. has retaliated with airstrikes. The Pentagon is considering a retaliatory strike again, but is faced with a dilemma that any military action might set off exactly what President Biden is trying to avoid, a wider Middle East war. Nora?
That's why this is significant. David Martin, thank you very much.
Off the coast of Yemen amid fears of a wider war. Our chief global affairs anchor, Martha Raddatz, is live from the Red Sea in Eilat, Israel with more. Good morning, Martha.
Good morning, Juju. We are right on the shores of the Red Sea. U.S. warships are just south of us. Those missiles from Yemen were aimed in this direction, but a U.S.-guided missile destroyer took no chances. They shot them down. This morning, rising tensions after a U.S. Navy destroyer shot down 3 cruise missiles and several drones launched by Iranian-backed Houthi rebels in Yemen. For the first time, the U.S. taking military action to defend Israel. The Pentagon saying the missiles were launched from Yemen northward, potentially towards Israel.
We cannot say for certain what these missiles and drones were targeting, but they were launched from Yemen.
The Navy remains a formidable fighting force, but even officers within the service have questioned its readiness. While the U.S. spent 20 years fighting land wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, the Pentagon watched China, its greatest geopolitical rival of the 21st century, build the largest navy in the world. China has threatened to use that navy to invade Taiwan, an important American ally. As tensions with China continue to rise, we wanted to know more about the current state of the U.S. Navy and how it's trying to deter China while preparing for the possibility of war.
The story will continue in a moment.
1/3 of the Navy is always deployed and operating at all times. The Navy's mustering right now about 300 ships, and there are about 100 ships at sea right now all around the globe.
Admiral Samuel Paparo commands the U.S. Pacific Fleet, whose 200 ships and 150,000 sailors and civilians make up 60% of the entire U.S. Navy. We met him last month on the aircraft carrier USS Nimitz, deployed near the U.S. territory of Guam, southeast of Taiwan, and the People's Republic of China, or PRC.
You've been operating as a naval officer for 40 years. How has operating in the Western Pacific changed?
In the early 2000s, the PRC Navy mustered about 37 vessels. Today, they're mustering 350 vessels.
This month, China's new foreign minister, Qin Gang, delivered a stern warning to the U.S. He said that if Washington does not change course in its stance towards China, conflict and confrontation is inevitable. This past August, when then Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi became the most senior U.S. political figure to visit Taiwan in 25 years, China called it a blatant provocation. The People's Liberation Army fired ballistic missiles into the sea around Taiwan and encircled the island with aircraft and warships.
So are Chinese warships now operating closer to Taiwan after Nancy Pelosi's visit?
Yes.
The best guess anyone has about China's ultimate intentions for Taiwan comes from the CIA. According to its intelligence assessment, China's President Xi Jinping has ordered the People's Liberation Army to be prepared to take back the island by force by 2027.
And if China invades Taiwan, what will the U.S. Navy do?
It's a decision of the President of the United States and a decision of the Congress. It's our duty to be ready for that. But the bulk of the United States Navy will be deployed rapidly to the Western Pacific to come to the aid of Taiwan if the order comes to aid Taiwan in thwarting that invasion.
Is the U.S. Navy ready?
We are ready, yes. I'll never admit to being ready enough.
Yes.
President Biden has declared 4 times, including on 60 Minutes, that the U.S. military would defend Taiwan, which is a democracy and the world's leading producer of advanced microchips.
604 Nimitz.
To reach the USS Nimitz, we first traveled to America's westernmost territory, the island of Guam, in the middle of the Pacific. Guam was taken by Imperial Japan 2 days after the attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941. U.S. Marines recaptured it 2.5 years later, and the island, about the size of Chicago, became an indispensable strategic foothold in the Western Pacific, as it remains today. From Guam, we boarded a Navy C-2 Greyhound. The Cold War-era transport plane takes people and supplies back and forth from land to the carrier. It was a short flight to the ship, and an even shorter landing.
Incredible. First cod landing?
Yes.
Oh, very nice. Certain operations.
Before school known as Top Gun.
When you talk about ships, what's the most powerful in the U.S. Navy?
It's an aircraft carrier, and its air wing is capable of 150 strike or air-to-air sorties per day, with, at its surge levels, the ability to deliver 900 precision-guided munitions every day and reloadable every night.
So even though China now has the largest navy in the world, they don't have anything like this in terms of aircraft carriers.
They do not, but they're working towards it. And they have 2 operational aircraft carriers right now.
That's China's 2 diesel-fueled carriers to the U.S.'s 11 nuclear-powered ones that can carry a total of about 1,000 attack aircraft, more than the navies of every other nation on Earth combined.
I'll tell you this, we are here to stay, right, in the South China Sea and in this part of the world. And I think that's the message that we really want to convey to not only China, but the entire world. We will sail wherever international law allows.
Lieutenant Commander David Ash flies an FA-18.
Do you get briefed on China's growing military threat and the progress that their Navy is making?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely we do. And they are making great progress in a lot of key areas.
The Chinese?
The Chinese are, from a military standpoint.
This video from Weapons Systems Officer Lieutenant Commander Matthew Carlton shows his FA-18 strafing ground targets with a machine gun on a U.S. weapons range near Guam. The pilots on the Nimitz also conduct air-to-air combat or dogfighting drills daily.
How aggressive has China become in the air?
Aggressive. And just some examples include unsafe, unprofessional intercepts where they move within single digits of feet of other aircraft, flashing the weapons that they have on board to the aircrew of the other aircraft, operating in international airspace, maneuvering their aircraft in such a way that denies the ability to turn in one direction. If they're safe and professional, then...
I call that crazy. We don't need that, right? We don't need that. It's a crazy thing. So let's move on to something different, guys. We hear enough of this, or enough. It's a lot of crazy things could happen. A lot of crazy things. I hope they found a way to bring peace, not fight. Too much, guys. It's too much.
Nations like Japan and the Philippines carry ties to the U.S. And this past week, Britain, the U.S., and Australia signed a landmark deal to jointly develop nuclear-powered attack submarines to patrol the Pacific. This is how China and Taiwan appear on most maps. This is how the Chinese Communist Party sees the Western Pacific, including the South and East China Seas from Beijing. Taiwan is the fulcrum in what China's leaders call the First Island Chain, a constellation of U.S. allies that stretches across its entire coast. Control of Taiwan is the strategic key to unlocking direct access to the Pacific and the sea lanes where about 50% of the world's commerce gets transported.
China has accused the United States of trying to contain them. What do you say to China?
I would say
to do business in dollars, euros, pounds, and yen.
The economic weapon, the rise of sanctions as a tool of modern war.
Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin. It is 19 months since Russia invaded Ukraine, and since then, the global community has mounted extreme pressure to deter it from escalating. NATO alliance countries have imposed many sanctions to try to hurt Russia's economy, its energy sector, its military, and its political elite. But a year and 7 months in, and it doesn't look like these sanctions are putting any pressure on Putin. Why hasn't Russia's economy completely faltered by now? While everybody has been distracted by what's going on in Ukraine, how has Russia been able to make new geopolitical alliances and strategic moves that can give them more power? Join us as we explain the crazy move Russia just made and how nobody noticed. The West and Russia are locked in a fierce economic battle, and both sides are using their strengths to gain an advantage. The West is imposing financial sanctions on Russia to punish it for its actions in Ukraine and other regions, while Russia is using its vast natural resources, especially oil and gas, to fight back. A recent example of this strategy was the production cut agreement between Russia and Saudi Arabia, which reduced the global oil supply by more than 1 million barrels per day. This move triggered a sharp increase in the oil price, which rose by 5% in a single day and reached a record high of over $94 per barrel. This is the highest price of oil in 2023, and it has serious consequences for the Western economies, which are already struggling with high inflation. Higher oil prices mean higher energy costs, which drive up the price of other goods and services. This puts more pressure on the central banks to raise interest rates, which can slow down economic growth and even push some countries into a recession. The impact of the oil price hike can be seen in the inflation and interest rate data of the U.S. and the EU. The U.S. Consumer Price Index, or CPI, inflation has rebounded to 3.7%, mainly due to rising energy interest rates to a record 4%, despite the fact that the EU is in a recession. The ECB has no choice but to tighten its monetary policy because the inflation rate in the Eurozone is too high and exceeds its target. This shows how powerful the energy supply is in influencing the economic conditions and how Russia is exploiting this power to challenge the West. But Russia is not satisfied with its current position. It has a bigger ambition to dominate the Arctic region, which holds enormous amounts of oil and gas reserves. According to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, the Arctic contains an estimated 90 billion barrels of oil, which accounts for 13% of the world's undiscovered oil reserves. Also, the Arctic has 30% of the global gas reserves, which are also largely untapped. These resources are worth trillions of dollars, and whoever can access them first will have a huge advantage in the global energy market. That is why the Arctic has become a hotspot for competition among major powers, such as the U.S., the EU, and Russia. Russia is already leading this rush, and they are combining efforts with China to secure natural gas from the region. There are reports that Russia's Arctic 2 LNG is set to start production sometime in 2023. This is an ambitious project that will extract the vast reserves of natural gas from the Arctic, exporting it to global markets. Now, if Russia manages to control oil and gas in the Arctic, it will be on par with Saudi Arabia and Qatar in energy production. This will complicate the West's efforts to sanction Russia or impose any oil price caps. This Arctic rush is more than just about making money. It's about geopolitical control and power. The last 2 years have taught us this fact. Whoever controls commodities essentially controls the world. But this is not the only reason why Russia is interested in the Arctic. The region also offers strategic advantages for its military and naval operations. According to a report by the U.S. Department of Defense, Russia has been expanding its military presence and capabilities in the Arctic, including building new bases, upgrading existing ones, deploying advanced weapons systems, and conducting exercises. Russia views the Arctic as a key area for its national security and defense, as well as a potential source of conflict with other countries, especially NATO members. The West has an obsession with going green quickly, and this obsession is handing Russia the advantage. The truth is that if you control the production and export of energy, you essentially control global economic growth. The West knows this, but they're too occupied with trying to go green. In 2020, Russia approved a program to invest over $300 billion for their Arctic adventure. This cash was used to build up infrastructure to harvest oil and gas beneath the ice. So, how much return from this investment can Russia expect? Just the oil and gas alone are worth $35 trillion. That's apart from the vast amounts of gold and base metals that are in the North Pole. So, Putin's Arctic investment could potentially return 10 to 100 times the investment. This will make Russia a bigger commodity superpower in the world. This should be very concerning to the West because containing Russia is about to become virtually impossible. The West won't be able to impose sanctions or oil price caps without Putin retaliating with production increases. Also, not only can they keep selling to the BRICS countries, but they will also have the supply power as well. And that's why this Arctic race is just so important. But there is more to the story than just economic benefits. The Arctic has strategic and geopolitical implications for Russia and the world. The Arctic is home to some of the most important shipping routes, such as the Northern Sea Route, which connects Europe and Asia through the Arctic Ocean. This route is shorter, cheaper, and safer than the traditional ones, such as the Suez Canal or the Strait of Malacca. Russia has been developing and promoting this route as an alternative to the Western-dominated ones and has been attracting more customers, especially from China, which is its main partner in the Arctic. Russia has also been strengthening its military and security presence in the region by deploying more troops, ships, submarines, aircraft, and missiles, as well as building new bases and radar stations. Russia claims that it is defending its national interest and sovereignty in the Arctic, but some of its actions have been seen as provocative and aggressive by other countries, especially the U.S. and NATO, which have their own interests and allies in the region. According to the Arctic Council, Russia holds over half, 53% of the Arctic Ocean coastline. Around 2.5 million Russians live in Arctic territories. They already have established communities there, so they're not just peering at the Arctic from afar. When we look at access to the Arctic, Russia stands out. While countries like Canada, the US, and Finland do have Arctic access, Russia's location is simply superior. More access means more control over Arctic sea routes. Extracting oil and gas is one thing, but if you can't transport them, it's a massive effort in vain. Russia's strategic position grants them almost complete control of the Northern Sea Route. This allows them to transport their energy resources from the Arctic to Europe or Asia efficiently. Here's why this matters. Without this route, Arctic deliveries must detour through Europe and pass through the Suez Canal. This poses significant challenges for Russia. The journey from West to East Asia spans over 21,000 kilometers, practically a world tour. Ships also have to navigate through Europe, encountering various bottlenecks that Russia would prefer to avoid. Thanks to the Northern Sea Route, Russia has shortened the distance for transporting their oil and gas to Asia by a remarkable 40%. This means that they can now ship their energy resources directly from the Arctic to countries like China and India in the east, saving both time and money. The Northern Sea Route is a game changer for Putin, and Russian vessels are already using it for trade. In a Bloomberg report titled "Russia Sends Oil to the Arctic Again to Speed Up Delivery to China," it's revealed that sailing through the Arctic Sea reduced the voyage to China by an impressive 30%. While there are undoubtedly environmental concerns to consider, it's essential to be realistic. Russia's primary focus is on dominating energy trade routes. They aim to expedite shipments to China to boost their revenue, and with this route, transporting oil and gas to Asia becomes more cost-effective. Putin can now redirect more of Russia's energy resources to his significant customers in Asia and reduce their dependence on Europe even further. It's highly likely that Russia will accelerate the development of this new Arctic trading route, increasing gas and oil production and prioritizing shipments to Asia as the EU's reliability as a customer becomes increasingly uncertain. What do you think? Can the West stop Russia's plan? Let us know in the comments section below.
Everyone else, both in terms of hatred and capabilities, and that is Iran. From day one, Iran has been involved in this war. They reportedly plotted the Hamas attack. They're also behind the escalation in Lebanon, and now Tehran has issued a new threat. It has come from their supreme leader himself. This is what he said.
If these crimes continue, the Muslims will become impatient, the resistance forces will become impatient, and no one will be able to stop them. Israel and the West should know this. Don't expect others to let such groups do such things. No one can stop them when they get impatient.
And who are these resistance groups? Probably Iran's proxies in West Asia. Their foreign minister also hinted at the possibility. He talked about preemptive strikes on Israel, which makes you wonder, how serious is this threat from Iran? Is it just rhetoric? Or is Tehran willing to walk the talk? First, some background. Israel and Iran were not always enemies. In fact, they were friends until 1979. The Shah of Iran called it a secret love affair. All that changed after the Iranian Revolution. The new regime called Israel the Little Satan, the great Satan being the US. And thus began the Israel-Iran shadow war. Both countries are located more than 1,000 kilometers away. They do not even share a border, yet they're sworn enemies. Iran's Ayatollah was all praises for the Hamas terrorists who attacked Israel. He said he would kiss their hands. And since then, Tehran has consistently warned of an escalation, of a wider war. But what does this threat mean? Will Iranian soldiers fight against Israel? It looks highly unlikely right now, but Iranian proxies could enter the fight. These are armed groups spread across West Asia. They're funded and supported by Iran, and in return, they do Tehran's bidding. In fact, let's pull up the map for you. You have the Hezbollah in Lebanon, arguably the most powerful Iranian proxy. You have the Houthis in Yemen, the Liva Fatemiyun in Syria, the Badr organization in Iraq, and of course the Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad in Gaza. These groups are all backed by Iran, and they could very well enter the fight. In fact, the Hezbollah has already signaled willingness. They've exchanged gunfire with Israel. They've also fired rockets at Israeli positions. Take a look at this video. It was released by Hezbollah. It shows them destroying surveillance cameras along the Israel-Lebanon border, and Hezbollah is not Hamas. They have more firepower and they have more men, which means Israel cannot take them lightly. But the Hezbollah will not act alone. Like Hamas, they will need the green light from Iran. So the question is, does Iran have the appetite for war? If you ask their leaders, always. But the reality is quite different. Iran's inflation is almost 47%. Unemployment is close to 8%. Their economy has been crippled by Western sanctions, so Iran may not want a direct war. Not unless they get support from allies like China. Plus, direct Iranian involvement could draw the US in, and Washington has some serious firepower in West Asia. Iran will think twice before taking on that. So while a proxy war is possible, a direct war looks unlikely. It's also never happened before. For all this talk, for all this enmity, Israel and Iran have never fought a direct war. And fighting one now makes little sense. Let me explain why I say this. Assume that Iran was behind the Hamas attack, or at the very least they supported it. Then their political objectives have already been met. The Saudi-Israel normalization has been paused. Israeli intelligence has been shamed. Benjamin Netanyahu will be a bonus, but a bonus that comes with a lot of risk. So Iran is mixing the rhetoric with some reason. Their foreign minister says Iran is not looking to expand the war, but that restraint cannot be one-sided.
Of course, the Americans send messages to us. Their message to Iran included calls for implementing restraint and not expanding the war. We respond to the Americans that we are not looking for an expansion of the war, but having restraint cannot be one-sided.
So a lot depends on Israel's Gaza operation. If it's a bloodbath, Iranian proxies could intervene. The Americans are also wary of this. They're yet to blame Iran for the Hamas terror attack. Remember, US media reports have blamed Iran, but the US government says there is no proof. So wider war is not inevitable. There is still time and ways to avoid it. What we need is rational leadership. It made an entire country forget their troubles. Afghans hit the streets, dancing and singing. For a brief moment, it was like the last 3 years did not happen. Yet, sports cannot erase reality. The same celebrations were proof of that. Because you heard firecrackers on one side and AK-47 gunfire on the other. For Economic Cooperation and Development, basically a club of rich countries, high-income countries. It's a club that has 38 members, including the US, France, Germany, Italy, and Canada. These are also the go-to countries for migrants. From the world over, people want to go and live there. Last year, 2.8 million people did that. 2.8 million foreign nationals migrated to an OECD country.
The day the Palestinian crisis began, everyone was expecting a prominent world leader such as Vladimir Putin, the Russian president, to address the situation in Gaza. However, he remained silent for a couple of days. Most of the information coming from the Russian president's office at that time pertained to the potential use of weapons supplied to Ukraine in the Gaza conflict. Other voices we heard were from Russian news influencers. Much of the news analysis in Russia derided both the United States and Israel military-industrial complex for their lack of precision in responding to Hamas' highly coordinated, counteroffensive. Assalamu alaikum, guys. Please like and share to help us.
Council resolution that would have called for a humanitarian ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. Now, the vote on the resolution that was drafted by Brazil had been delayed twice as the United States, for its part, had agreed on a deal with Egypt for an aid corridor. Now, 12 members out of 15 voted in favor of the draft text, while Russia, the United Kingdom, abstained from voting, and the only country that vetoed it was the United States of America. On Wednesday, during the US President Joe Biden's visit, Israel agreed to allow aid into the Gaza Strip through the Rafah crossing near Egypt. Washington says that it is direct diplomacy that can save lives. In addition, the United States says that it is disappointed that the draft has not mentioned anything about the Israeli right to self-defense, where Israel continues with its relentless campaign of air bombings on the Gaza Strip.
The United States is disappointed this resolution made no mention of Israel's rights of self-defense. Let's be clear. Hamas's own actions have brought this on, this severe humanitarian crisis in Gaza. And Hamas has caused so much needless suffering, death, and destruction. Every member state should condemn Hamas's terrorism